Hello. Today I'm making a video about Brave New World Revisited. And this is going to be a video presentation for my university English literature class, which is British novels from the first half of the 20th century. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley was published in 1931. And this book that I'm talking about today, Brave New World Revisited, was published in 1958. 27 years after the first novel. And if you've never heard of this novel, it's not a sequel to Brave New World. What it is, Huxley, over the years, wrote essays about some of his ideas and concepts that he used for his science fiction novel, Brave New World. And he expanded on these nonfiction. These are his personal essays about mainly government control and the troubles that plague the world. So it's key to remember that this was being written in the mid-50s. I'm going to be talking about chapter 1 and the two final chapters, chapter 11 and 12. And chapter 1, the title is Overpopulation. And this is one of the key problems that Huxley deals with throughout Brave New World Revisited, that he goes back to this question of overpopulation again and again. It is very much worth noting that when it was published in 1958, the world population that he was so worried about was 2.8 billion. What is it today? Just slightly over 8 billion. So what does he talk about in chapter 1? Mostly, he is preoccupied with in Brave New World, and Orwell was preoccupied with in 1984. His main question is about government control of the population and what that means for an overpopulated world. Two of his main ideas. He talks about birth control, which I think we're all very familiar with, and if you're not, you should speak to your parents who've been negligent. And he has this other concept of death control, which sounds very traumatic, but in fact, it's actually quite an easy concept. I would like to speak about death control first. It is key to remember that this was published in 1958 when the world was a simpler place. And he talks about penicillin, which I think sometimes we forget how miraculous the development of penicillin is, to fight infections. He talks about clean drinking water, which very sadly and strangely is not available to everyone on Earth. The shame of it is he talks about penicillin and clean drinking water as things that are very cheap, that the government can easily afford to extend the lives of the populace. We wonder, well, why doesn't everyone on Earth have clean drinking water? That is a question for someone much smarter than me. And the third thing hasn't really aged very well, that he is a very strong proponent of DDT. Now, I don't know if my younger classmates will know what DDT is, but once upon a time, it used to be this magical pesticide, which was going to ensure that the harvests, fruit and vegetable, or the harvest would be abundantly luxurious, and that we would have food for the nation, and that pests and insects, that wouldn't be an issue anymore. As it turned out, DDT was actually extremely toxic and very harmful to humans and animals and the earth, and it was universally banned, prohibited in, I think, 1972. So that has not aged very well for the novel Brave New World, where he keeps talking about, oh, thank God we have DDT. But just imagine that he's talking about pesticide and perhaps really good quality fertilizer that ensures that the farmers always have a good harvest. So that is what he talks about in terms of death control, so that the population can live extended, longer, healthy lives. Death control. And birth control, so that we don't have a superabundance of babies, as some countries do. Now, what he's doing with these two concepts, birth control and death control, is he's saying that death control, remember, penicillin, clean drinking water, and pesticides, those are all very cheap and very easily accessible to the government, and those are in effect. Whereas birth control relies on the individual to be responsible, wear a condom. That is the failing, that people are not responsible and people will be negligent if they are allowed to be. His theory is that an overpopulated world will lead to a totalitarian rule, a government that rules as a very strong dictatorship, as the case is in North Korea. China's and India's population currently, they are exactly the same. They both stand at 1.42 billion, China and India each. China, very strong state-controlled population. India, sadly, I don't know how the government controls the Indian population. Let me read a quote from the text. So Huxley ends the chapter, Overpopulation, with this statement, this very dramatic and pessimistic statement. If overpopulation should drive underdeveloped countries into totalitarianism, and if these new dictatorships should ally themselves with Russia, North Korea, China, then the military position of the United States would become less secure, and the preparations for defense and retaliation would have to be intensified. But liberty, as we all know, cannot flourish in a country that is permanently on a war footing, or even a near war footing. Permanent crisis justifies permanent control of everybody and everything by the agencies of the central government. And permanent crisis is what we have to expect in a world in which overpopulation is producing a state of things in which dictatorship under communist auspices becomes almost inevitable. Yeah, that is what Huxley's fear is in chapter 1, that overpopulation will lead to more totalitarian government regimes. In the case of China, he's not wrong. All right, let's move to chapter 11. Chapter 11 is called Education for Freedom. The main gist of chapter 11 is that people need to be more educated. And what they should be educated about is being aware of propaganda. When the voice of the government, advertising, anything, when you are being spoken to be aware of how true it might be, what manipulations might be hiding within those statements. Yes, he talks about thorough training in the art of analyzing the techniques of propaganda and seeing through the lies. That's a bit of a difficult one because it seems that we are just so, it's not that we're surrounded by lies, it's we're surrounded by so many contrary voices. Now with the internet, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all of the other social media outlets, we have so many conflicting voices and opinions to listen to. How do we ever decide which one we would like to follow as the truth? And what Huxley is trying to encourage people to do is to be aware of propaganda and to be more questioning about what is the truth. Is this the truth? Can I believe it? Should I believe it? Should I actually try to learn more about the subject so that I know the truth firsthand rather than being told it by this media outlet? Or perhaps I should just doubt it completely and just say, no, that is not the truth. Just refuse to believe what you are being told. Huxley points out this very interesting idea that in 1937, they opened in Britain an Institute for Propaganda Analysis. But 1937, it was the very close to the beginning of the Second World War. The Institute for Propaganda Analysis was shut down just a very short 4 years later in 1941 because people said that it's not good for the population. It wasn't the government just saying, no, that's not good for the... It was many voices from many sides that actually the military, of course, said, no, that's bad because they wanted people to believe their military propaganda. Priests and advertisers, of course, were against it because advertising and religion will quickly fall apart if people are too skeptical and if people start asking questions about how can I possibly believe that? Like, why should I believe these statements that you are just force-feeding me? As well, even educators said that it was not good or healthy for students to analyze propaganda too much because it would make students too cynical. The Institute for Propaganda Analysis wasn't shut down just because it was unpopular. It was shut down because there were so many dissenting voices saying that we do not want a public asking too many questions about, is this the truth? Funny that. Now, when we get to chapter 12, the final chapter of the collection, What Can Be Done? He comes back to the idea of overpopulation, because he really thinks this is one of the most severe crises facing the Earth. Overpopulation is really what is going to be the main problem that we're going to have to grapple with because it means the depletion of all of the Earth's natural resources, and we simply will not be able to feed enormous population. And he really strongly reinforces his strong advocacy for birth control. Again, something that makes the book a bit of a historic anachronistic. Is that the right word? Like he's wondering, when will we ever get the pill, an oral contraceptive that people can take so that they don't reproduce accidentally? So I actually checked that. I was wondering, we've had this pill, the birth control pill, for a long time, but actually we haven't had it for a long time, that it was being developed in the 1960s and it wasn't available to the public commonly until the 1970s. The pill, that was what he thought was really going to have a massive effect on the world's overpopulation problem, that he thought that, this pill that people could take so they weren't reproducing would change the world. And we know that it hasn't. Okay, food supply, resources, squandering the world's resources. So I just wonder what resources he was worried about squandering at the time. I think the lack of available farmland, livestock raising to feed this exploding population is still quite a big worry. His final, I don't know how much I feel this is like sort of his final ideas. He recommends that we try to reorganize society so that it operates better in terms of smaller communities, so that rather than this massive concentration based around a city, we try to have a more broadly spread network of smaller communities. So a community that was more reliant on the farmers that serve that community and the doctors that serve that community and the educators, and that small town cohesion of people working together, knowing one another and working more closely together would be something that he felt would be the answer to the big problem of society. One of the last points that he makes in chapter 12 is that young people should do more to educate themselves about what is going on in society and the world. It's hard to argue with that. Aldous Huxley's final statement, the last chapter of Brave New World Revisited, this is it. Meanwhile, there is still some freedom left in the world. Many young people, it is true, do not seem to value freedom, but some of us still believe that without freedom, human beings cannot become fully human, and that freedom is therefore supremely valuable. Perhaps the forces that now menace freedom are too strong to be resisted for very long. It is still our duty to do whatever we can to resist them. And I believe there he's mainly talking about totalitarian governments, dictatorial rulers, of course, abusing the world's resources and taking far more than we put back in. I think he's making a sharp statement to young people that try not to be so preoccupied with young people thoughts and pastimes. It is a hard thing to say, like to kind of put the burden onto young people and say, look, I know you love chatting on your telephone and playing completely mindless video games all the time, and you like to watch superhero films, but please try to find the time to educate yourselves so that you can contribute to society, because young people, we need you. We need you to be responsible, and we need you to make a difference, because it is your responsibility. Yeah, all of the previous generations have made a terrible mess of it, and it is your responsibility to try to overcome all of the things of the past. But guess what? You're smart enough and you have the resources, you have the wealth, especially in the Western nations where there is quite a lot of wealth. And we do have a lot of good schools and institutions where you can go to get a good education. And we do have the internet, which is something that he doesn't even imagine in this text. He never even considers the idea of the internet as this massive resource for learning about anything and everything imaginable and truthful. I know, I feel like it's such a shame to say this, because I know it's such a burden, but try to grow up and be mature and accept your responsibility, because the world needs you. I'm sorry, it's a shame and I know it, but that's the truth. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. My name is Grant. This is Grant Loves Books. This is one of my university video essays, so not my usual thing, although it has become my usual thing lately. Thank you very much, everyone, for sticking with me and watching the videos. Please subscribe. Almost 1,000 subscribers. Like, probably by the time this video is published on YouTube, 1,000 subscribers. Take care. Have a great day. That's all. Just shut up and turn the video off. Stop playing video games. I'll even give you the superhero films if you just stop playing the video games, because the video games are really a total waste. And the superhero films, once a week you have your 2 hours of stupid bullshit. Yeah, okay, all right. But the video games, honestly, that is like just electronic heroin. You have to get off the video games, young people.